Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie Park, Program Manager for the Technology Leadership Summer Institute at UCLA Anderson. And I'd like to welcome you to this very special talk about building a diverse and equitable tech ecosystem in Los Angeles. This discussion today is a part of the Technology Leadership Summer Institute, a summer program focused on helping undergrad students build leadership and practical skills necessary for a career in the tech sector. As for the format of today's event, we will start with a brief overview of PledgeLA, go into the panel, and then use Slido for a moderated Q&A session. Now, I'd like to introduce you to the moderator of today's panel, Calvin South. Calvin is an experienced partnership builder and advocate for diversity, equity, and justice. He's currently working as the program lead of Annenberg Tech at the Annenberg Foundation, where he leads operations and program management for PledgeLA, a collective of 220 plus tech companies and VC firms hosted in partnership with the LA Mayor Garcetti. He received his BA from Cornell University, where he studied history, Spanish, and Latin American studies. Thank you for joining us for this very special talk today, Calvin.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Thank you to UCLA Anderson and TLSI for having us. This is an important topic that we're excited to talk to you all about. And I just want to say before we get started, we hope to have a non-traditional panel that is really more of a conversation with you. So even though we're here, we can't see you with the Zoom gallery view. We're very much excited to have a dialogue, and I please encourage you to use Slido, use those questions. We do want to have more about some crosstalk a little bit later. So we're only going to have about a 20-minute panel and then want to open that back up to you. So let me go ahead and just tell you just a little bit about PledgeLA. I'm dropping a link in the chat. So yeah, Jamie told you a little bit about it, but PledgeLA is essentially a collective of LA-based VC firms and tech companies that have come together to make a little bit of a different kind of diversity pledge. You may have seen a lot of diversity pledges and statements kind of out there, especially in the tech ecosystem, but PledgeLA came together with a focus on accountability. So members, which are the companies that are part of PledgeLA, they don't pay any fees to be a member or anything like that, but what they do is agree to share data about the progress they're making when it comes to improving diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what PledgeLA does is help them both with that data collection, but also surrounding the ecosystem with programs like venture capital internships, tech mentorship programs, one of which, shout out to UCLA Anderson, is hosted with Reardon Programs. We matched leaders from LA Tech to work with first-gen college students, help them accelerate their entrance into the tech sector and hopefully here in LA. So yeah, we try to take an ecosystem approach to really move the needle so that the sector here looks like LA. And that's sort of our simple goal. We believe the sector from top to bottom should look like the diversity of Los Angeles. So I'm really excited, and you can check out more of our work on the link, but I'm excited to introduce our two wonderful panelists who you'll be speaking with today. First up is Jason Crockett, who is a member of PledgeLA's Executive Leadership Committee and also a public policy manager at Snap Inc. Jason actually helped found PledgeLA, and you'll get to hear a little bit about that when he was previously at the Mayor's Office of Economic Development with Mayor Garcetti. Also thrilled to introduce Yana Carballo, who is the Global Head of Investments and Sales Support with BCG Digital Ventures, pardon me. They are an active PledgeLA member, core part of our initiative, and Yana has had many collaborations with us, so we're thrilled to welcome her back to the virtual stage today, where she'll be telling you a little bit about the corporate venture space and some take on investments there, so excited to hear from her. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and invite Jason to take up the first round of questions, if that's okay, to put you in the hot seat. And yeah, I'd just like, Jason, can you tell us a little bit more, how did you land your current role at Snap, a company everybody's heard about, and what was your path to your public policy manager role?
Sure. And hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. Just one other fact, in addition to being a member of the Snap team, I'm also a Bruin, currently at UCLA's Executive MBA program. So it's a double pleasure to be here today and talk about something that's near and dear to my heart with PledgeLA and the work that they've been doing. So I've been with the Snap team for a little over 7 months now. So I'm relatively new to a growing company. But I had the chance to really get to know and work with Snap a little bit during my time working for Mayor Garcetti's office, as Calvin had mentioned, which is where I was prior to joining Snap. And I oversaw economic development for a number of industries, including biotech and healthcare, our sports policy, I oversaw our tax policy, and then I oversaw our policy with tech and VC firms. So I got to work a lot on helping to grow the tech industry, helping to attract companies that are within various tech verticals to LA, being an advocate for LA, and helping those companies really navigate City Hall. If you've ever tried to work with the city, doing anything in land use or permitting or anything like that, it can be a bit of a challenge, frankly. So my job was really to be that concierge, working with those key industry companies within those key industries. During that time, I got to work with Snap a bunch, particularly on some of their corporate social responsibility efforts that ultimately dovetailed nicely into their involvement with PledgeLA. But they were a founding member of one of our key initiatives focused on bringing students from the Higher LA's youth program, which is targeted at 16 to 24-year-olds, and helping them connect to positions within tech. So previously, Higher LA's youth had been focused on a lot of service industry jobs, which are great jobs, but we want to diversify. We want to take advantage of the growth of LA's tech ecosystem. And so we look to Snap as one of the largest tech companies based in LA, arguably probably one of the better known success stories in LA tech. And we said, hey, we really want you all to come on board and be a partner. And they were absolutely excited to join that effort and create pathways for students to get summer internships within Snap Inc. And so working with them and seeing the excellent work that they do for the community, as well as the exciting work that they're doing through Snapchat, their core product, it was a very, very interesting company. And as I transitioned out of the mayor's office, thinking about what I want to do, I want to be a part of the private sector, but work for a company that was really invested in LA the way that I had been in the 5 years prior during my time at the mayor's office. And so that opportunity with Snap checked all of those boxes.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and you gave us a little bit of a preview of sort of that interaction between the private sector and government, but can you give us, as a brief follow-on, a little bit of what does a day in the life look like as a public policy manager for folks who are kind of curious of what that role, like what are some of your key responsibilities? What stakeholders do you work with, in and outside the company?
Sure, absolutely. In public policy, my focus is to be the bridge between the company and the public sector. And I focus specifically on the greater LA area. So I work closely with the city of Santa Monica, the county of LA, and the city of LA, where Snap has a footprint. And I work to provide perspective on Snap's position on various legislation that may be deliberated inside any of those bodies, whether it be related to the tech industry or the business community broadly. There's a lot around land use and things of that nature. So my goal is to be an advocate for Snap and to provide our perspective on many of those things. What you'll find in dealing with tech, and you see this at really every level, federal, state, county, and local, there are a lot of legislatures that are very interested and they want to get involved, but they don't necessarily have the background. And we're still at a place where there aren't many staffers that bring a tech perspective or tech background to the public sector yet. So my role is to help be kind of that, provide that background and perspective on how things work. And so I also work closely internally with various teams to help provide voice and understanding on kind of how our product works. Work closely with our trust and safety team when legislators have questions around, well, how does Snap manage content moderation, or how does Snap ensure that the user's information is kept safe, or if there are any issues such as bullying on a platform, how does Snap respond? I really serve as that go-between to help explain those things. And then, of course, the fun part is I get to work with those same legislators in helping figure out how can Snap be an advocate for the work that you're doing? How can our efforts really align? And so many legislators, especially in LA, as tech grows, are really, really keen on seeing the industry grow in a more inclusive and diverse manner. So again, this is a perfect area. I know we're getting to kind of where PledgeLA plays that role, but really from Snap's perspective, I get to be the one to work with legislators on how we can partner with their key initiatives as it relates to our corporate social responsibility goals.
Thank you. It sounds like a big job, but also that you're getting to sort of, forge some new paths in a space where, as you said, a lot of folks don't have yet that tech experience, working in the policy space. Awesome. So I know you may be a little biased as one of our board members, but you helped launch PledgeLA back in 2018 when the conversation around diversity in tech was in a very different place. Why did you choose to get involved? And from your perspective, how effective has PledgeLA been? Since our founding in 2018.
Oh yeah, this was a no-brainer. This was a priority of the mayors coming in, wanting to see the growth of tech be more inclusive, more reflective of the broader LA ecosystem, and really take advantage of the diversity that is our strength. And there have been so many reports. BCG actually worked with us closely in being able to articulate the value add of having a more diverse workforce to many of these creative and innovative companies. They're better able to speak to the demographic that is ultimately your customer base or user base. So for me, it was, just the perfect opportunity to really advance the mayor's goals. And the Annenberg Foundation, where you're at, Calvin, was such a unique partner. We talk a lot about 3Ps or P3s, I should say, in development or just in the private sector generally, which is bringing together the public and private sector, and transportation projects are P3s, development goals, P3s. This was really a P4. This was public, private, and philanthropy coming together, which is something that you don't see often. And I think has really made the difference because we've been able to bring capacity and staffing and programming and real resources to bear to help better coordinate across the public and private sector as we pursue these goals. So I think really the Annenberg Foundation has added so much value there. How have we done? I think we've done a really, really good job since launching and since collecting our first round of data on regional diversity. And for everyone, our second round is actually coming out, I believe, tomorrow. So this is really exciting. We'll have some really incredible comparisons to share with the LA community and nationally. But I think we've done a good job of reframing the argument. For so long, this was a question of pipeline. We have to strengthen the pipeline. And there's truth there. We absolutely have to strengthen the pipeline. But I want to share a data point that BCG actually put together for us. So thank you indirectly, Anna. Your team has been amazing in helping us with this. But the point is that Black and Latino students earn 17% of STEM degrees within the LA area, but represent less than 20% fewer STEM professionals than graduates. So there's a 20% gap in the number of actual professionals that you would expect seeing in STEM-related fields based on the number of degrees awarded among Black and Latino graduates within the LA area. So it's not just the pipeline. There are qualified candidates. And how are they slipping through the cracks when everyone is talking about this topic and it's so front and center? And it has been nationally and in areas where you've seen kind of more established tech hubs like Seattle, Silicon Valley. It has been for a while, for probably the better part of a decade. How is it that we're still struggling to capture all those highly qualified, highly capable individuals, and where can we improve? And that's where PledgeLA has really started to shift that conversation, both by presenting that argument to pledge signatories, but also by providing solutions and how people can look at their recruitment efforts from a different lens, a more equitable lens, broaden their scope of universities that they're recruiting from. And I know we'd all love for everyone to only go to UCLA to get their to recruit. But we have amazing universities. Cal State LA is #1 in economic advancement among its students. That means students coming there see the largest uptick in life outcomes economically than in any other university, not in the city, not in the state, in the country. That's amazing. We should be beating down their doors for students, because it is a university that is located in a lower income area and serves predominantly lower income and diverse students. And I think for many companies that was not immediately apparent. There's a gap in kind of, the goal and how it was being articulated versus the actual steps that can be taken to get there. And PledgeLA has helped to fill that void. I think over the next probably 3 to 4 years, we'll start to hopefully see some really meaningful impact from these efforts, the fruits of our labor here.
Thank you. I appreciate you mapping sort of the shift from why does diversity matter to how do we actually tactically really boil that down and move the needle. And, I think that, with talent recruitment, it's been something we think about a lot at PledgeLA. I appreciate you shouting out Cal State LA, where we really love to market our programs. But yeah, there really is still in a lot of conversations that pipeline myth of like, there just aren't folks. So busting that in misconceptions. Jan, I see you have some add.
No, I totally agree. Pipeline has always been a challenge, so they say, right? But I think there's so many things that we're starting to tease out through data that's showing us that there's other things happening, right, that we need to get on top of. I think that there's so many different opportunities for folks now to graduate from college and pursue a various range, right, of careers that don't really align with traditional paths, right? So, speaking from someone like myself who graduated with a couple like engineering degrees, I only thought that I had one path available to me when I graduated, right? And that was to pursue a job in corporate America. Now it's not like that, right? You can be an entrepreneur, you can go work at a startup, you can work in corporate, you can work in nonprofit. I think truly the sky is the limit, right? And the traditional path is no longer traditional, right? Nor is your career linear. So I love that people are starting to think about their careers more broadly and really think about what makes sense for them and where will they go to an organization or an environment that respects them, that appreciates them, right? And rewards them and rewards the talent that they're bringing to the organization. I think, to be honest with you, that's more important than anything, right? Making sure that you're at a place that values you, that respects you, and that sees you, right? And appreciates you for who you are and leverages the best of what you have to bring to every single situation that the company provides for you.
Yana, you're hitting on a question that I was going to ask Jason, but I'd love for both of your take on this, which is, there's been a lot of recent media coverage in recent years that's showing that, millennial Gen Z job seekers care a lot about the diversity and the culture, of the inclusion part of it, of, companies they're interviewing with, it's sort of, and it influences where they choose to work and take their talents. So, what's your take if actually in an interview cycle, when you're going through that high stress, you're being evaluated, you're going through all these rounds, how do you suss that out? What are some questions? What are some things you can do to learn more about that in an organization? Sometimes, you meet just a couple people and you don't know the whole org.
I would say do your own research. I think you'll definitely get a lot of answers through the interview cycle, but I think you are your best judge of what you're looking for. And a lot of what you're looking for stems through data, right? Quantitative data, metrics. A lot of that can be found online. If you're pursuing a company, especially a public company, a lot of those DE&I metrics are public knowledge, right? They're on reports that are, literally sitting on quarterly annual statements that the company generates, right? So do your due diligence, right? Go online and see what's out there. I would also say talk to people, right? Like there are so many platforms now. I mean, I just found out about Blind. There's Glassdoor, obviously. There's so many social media platforms that folks are using to talk to each other in the employee space. Leverage that, right? Talk to folks, blindly reach out to folks on LinkedIn. I've done that various times. Before I joined DV, one of the first things I did was look online to see how many people at DV look like me and how many people can I try to reach out to on LinkedIn to get more information about this company before I make a decision. I think the website and the internet is just a wealth of knowledge, and I don't think we take enough advantage of that, especially when it comes to making really, really important decisions about our career.
I appreciate that. And one quick follow-up there. I know sometimes, I was going to say, well, find someone or can be connected to kind of get a read on culture, but it sounds like you've even reached out to folks maybe you haven't been connected with to have those pre-conversations. What do those LinkedIn messages look like? Do you say, hey, I'm interviewing, I'd love to hear, how do you get responses? I think some folks are sometimes afraid to reach out. They don't have that direct connection.
You have to do what works for you and what makes you feel most comfortable. I'm fairly outgoing. I've got a fairly high EQ, right? So Sometimes I'll reach out with a subject line that says, hey, what's up, right? Sometimes I'll be more formal. It just depends on the person, right? The person I'm looking to make contact with and exactly what is it that I'm looking to achieve, right? Once I make that connection. I think being really, really clear on that and really being mindful of that person's time is also something to be really, really thoughtful of. You want to make sure that not only are you getting something out of this, but they are too, right? So making sure that you're thoughtful and respectful of that space.
Thank you. Jason, what would you add to the scoping out diversity, while in interview process piece?
Yeah, I think Iana hit on a lot of the core points. Talking to someone that part of the challenge is that we know for underrepresented candidates that that's another area where there's a gap. That part of the issue is they oftentimes don't know someone there, or they may not themselves kind of have a network that would lend themselves to being able to inform their recruitment and interview process. So I think the research part is so important. Snap, for example, we put out an annual report that's pretty detailed. It's like 60 some odd pages about our DEI efforts. Not every company does that, but most companies are starting to put out some sort of report, executive summary that kind of narrates what they're doing. And then I think in the interview, and it may feel somewhat uncomfortable because this is still a space where we're evolving as a people, getting, normalizing talking about this stuff. But it is okay to talk about what is your culture like? And then listen for what they give back to you, how they respond, kind of ask those leading questions. What are the resources available to employees? Most people will respond we have X, Y, and Z employee resource groups, and then ask, what do they do? What are kind of their areas of focus? So those follow-up questions can help give you a sense of how seriously they're taking this sort of thing, DE&I work. And for smaller companies, I think, for many of them, they're not going to have ERG groups. They're not going to have employee resource groups oftentimes because they're just bootstrapping. They're trying to make it, or they may just be so small it doesn't even make sense to have an ERG. But asking that question of what does it feel like to work here? What are kind of your perspectives on recruiting, and how are you ensuring that the team looks like the consumer base that you're serving? And I think that's especially true for LA-based companies because LA is so diverse.
I think the beauty of the culture question is that so many people answer it differently, right? So I don't think in any organization, when you ask someone, what is the culture of this organization, you're going to get the same answer twice. So feel comfortable asking, right, to speak to other people, right? If you know, for example, that the corporation has an ERG that you would potentially like to join, ask to speak to someone within the ERG, right? Make sure that you're doing your due diligence. That's another checkpoint that you can use, right? To get questions answered, right? To help you make an informed decision about what career is best for you and where.
I love the what's the culture question. And I like to hear an answer a little more detailed than it's great. I like to hear some adjectives and descriptions. So yeah, that's a great one to see, how are they going to kind of tell you about that? Well, I have one more closeout question for Jason, and then we're definitely, again, I see Dorina put in the chat. If you have questions for either Jason or Iana, we are going to have our Q&A, so feel free to drop those in Slido. But we are here, talking to TLSI, Jason. What advice would you have for someone who, seeing all this exciting growth in LA's tech and innovation sector, what advice do you have for someone who wants to break in? How can they break into LA tech? What are the pathways? I think sometimes it can seem very mystified, and or where are those doors?
Yeah, I think first off, there are more and more organizations that are trying to bring awareness to the job openings. So Valence, for example, is a product that launched recently it's meant to be kind of the LinkedIn for diverse candidates looking to find careers in tech and connect more broadly. And they're not focused just in LA, but you can obviously filter your search. Built in LA is another one that's a great resource. And then I think the point that Iana made is so, I cannot tell you how important it is. Don't take for granted the fact that people want to be helpful and want to see you succeed. And LinkedIn is an incredible resource. So if you see a job that you like or a place that you would like to work, going on the LinkedIn, figuring out who works there, start with the folks that you may know or may have a secondary relationship with, but then, shooting off a couple of messages. And yeah, there may be a 20% response rate, but that's okay. That's fine. You've lost nothing by shooting blindly and saying, hi, my name is, X, Y, and Z. I'm very interested in your firm and I'm looking at applying to this position. And I would love to just briefly talk to either yourself or someone that that can maybe provide some perspective on how I can help my resume stand out. And find 10, 15 minutes to talk with whoever you can reach at that company. And that will absolutely set you apart from the folks that are just submitting their resumes. And I see some people have put, oh, Ian, I'll let you talk to a couple of other resources that you know of, because I think there's so much out there. But again, cannot emphasize enough that reaching out via LinkedIn is a legit way if you do it properly and you're professional and you state exactly what you're looking for and what you're hoping to accomplish.
Yeah, I dropped the list. You want to share a little bit about Angel.co? Angel is?
Angel's another one, right? Great platform that a lot of folks use for startups, right? So if you're interested in like the startup space, there's a lot of really, really great resources here. A lot of really great jobs that are being posted for either new companies that we haven't yet heard of or more established companies. So for example, I know DV posts a lot of open roles on Angel.co. So it's a wealth of information, right? Across various, right, corporations that you should definitely tap into. What I like about this platform in particular is that not only can you filter by geography, you can also filter by competency. So if you're interested in like an engineering opportunity, you can filter for that. If you're interested in a marketing opportunity, you can filter for that, right? So you can kind of see cross competency, right? Cross-functional area of expertise, what opportunities are available.
Thank you for that. And Jason, I dropped the link to Valence and Built in LA so folks can check that out. And as we pivot to some more questions for Iana, I will just want to double click on what Jason said about people in LA tech. I'm someone who's new in the space as of a couple of years, have been pretty collaborative and open. I've been sort of surprised when you think of how big LA is, all the things going on here. There are a lot of people in the ecosystem that are willing to connect, make connections, be collaborative. And I think it is one of the strengths here in the region. So if you're interested in the sector, please make those connections or reach out to us. Let us help them make it for you too. So let me pivot over to Iana. I want to ask you a little bit more about your role at BCG Digital Ventures. You're the head of global investments, sales support. How did you find your way into the corporate venture space, and what makes corporate VC different from a traditional VC firm?
Great. So I've actually been in corporate for about 20 years. I started my career in management consulting. So it's so funny. Like when I look at like the course of my career, I've literally come full circle. Corporate venture capital is interesting, right? So at its shell, it's really about corporations working with BCG to build businesses, whether they're looking for an opportunity to further their revenue, whether they're looking for opportunities to grow their bottom line. They come to DV and they say, listen, we want to disrupt our industry. We want to disrupt our sector, right? So they give us dollars and we work directly with that corporation to build a new business, right? That's what corporate venture capital is, right? Venture capital is a little different. Venture capital is organized around funds and around industries. So if I'm a fund manager, for example, I'll have a $10 million budget per year to invest in whatever industries hit my sector. So if technology is my sector of choice, then I have $10 million to spend on investing in the next Uber. I have $10 million to invest in the next Google, right? So we're a little different in that way. I would say VC is more business to business, people to people, almost B2C. We play more in a B2B space, business to businesses working with each other.
Thank you. And I want to come back to, you were talking about a little bit earlier about that non-traditional path. And, we really are seeing, many more recent graduates interested in jumping into entrepreneurship, jumping into startups. What advice would you have for graduates that want to pursue soon, that non-traditional path after graduation? What are some important considerations for folks who want to take that alternate path?
I say go for it, right? It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. I think it's a great opportunity to pursue right out of college because you're fresh, you're hungry, right? Like you're still learning. And I think, the path to entrepreneurship is so broad that it just gives you so many different paths and so many doors to pursue. There's so many companies that work directly with startups and with entrepreneurs to really help them frame their thinking, frame their business case, really help them think about fundraising, right? And getting dollars and making sure that they have the right group of stakeholders around them. When I moved to LA 3 years ago, I hooked up very quickly with a couple organizations. So Techstars is definitely an organization that comes highly recommended personally by me. I worked with them a couple years ago to develop a cohort of tech talent, right? And really helping them to refine their business case, really helping them to crystallize their business concept. And once they have that model down, really helping them to fundraise, right? And get dollars to really back and support their idea. PledgeLA is also a really, really great company to partner with, right? So I partner with them, not only with BCGDV, but I've also done some work with them last year on some strategy workshops, right? And kind of thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I would say more broadly across the corporate landscape.
Now, one of the things, an important topic with startups, let's talk a little bit about fundraising. Sometimes it's too many people think, how am I going to raise this capital that I need for my business, whether it's from a VC or somewhere else? How can someone, raise the capital they need to launch their business? And if you're new to fundraising, how do you get started with that?
So 10 years ago, I was kind of in a similar boat. I was launching my first business and I was in the mode of trying to bootstrap and fundraise and figure out where my dollars were going to come from. And I didn't think too much about VC firms, right? I was thinking more about like family crowdfunding, like how much money can I hit up from my mom and how much money can I get from my dad? And I created a GoFundMe account, right? And I worked with some nonprofit organizations in Brooklyn, like Canva, to really help me like crystallize and really think about like my business plan and my business concept. I also worked very closely with Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, right? So before you start looking at like these big VCs that have these like massive dollars to spend, get creative, right? Because that's kind of part and parcel of being an entrepreneur. Like you got to be kind of scrappy. You got to be kind of bootstrap, right? So think about like your innermost circle. Think about people that that are operating in similar spaces that you could potentially tap into, right? And create your own network. I think once you fully exhausted and tap that, then you can start looking at VCs. And what's interesting is last month I was reading an Essence article when I was on vacation in Martha's Vineyard. And there's a really cool 2-page spread on all of the Black VCs in the country right now. And there's about 10, right? Happy to shout them out here. There's quite a few. There's Black-led VC funds. There's Mac Venture Capital, Collab Capital, Include Ventures. There's Fearless Fund, Harlem Capital, and Founders First Capital Partners. So there's quite a few Black-led founder groups now that didn't exist 10 years ago that you should definitely look at, right? And consider, like once you have a really solid framework in place to be able to request those dollars.
Thank you. And I appreciate you underscoring, not overlooking those programs that can really help you build network capital, and sort of step up to be able to access venture dollars. One other that I would add to the group to share is Grid 110. They're also a PledgeLA member and based here in LA. And they've seen a number of companies, even though they're a nonprofit, don't take any equity from businesses. They've had a couple of their alumni go on to accelerators like Techstars. You can sort of see, that happening with people really raising the capital and growing their businesses right here in the ecosystem. Thank you for that. You talked a little bit about this with your work where you helped us as PledgeLA with the diversity and equity deep dives last year, but can you share a little bit more about some of the ways that BCG Digital Ventures has been involved as a member of PledgeLA? What's some involvement you've had and what impacts, if any, have you seen from being part of our organization?
Great. So I know this summer we recently hosted an intern, right, as part of the PledgeLA VC internship. We also provide annual data on diversity, equity, inclusion across our North America population. And what's cool about that data this year is that helped to inform our first inaugural DE&I report that we actually sent across all of US, right, for the first time ever. So it was great that we had that subset of data to leverage from our work with PledgeLA. We've also, as you know, participated in a lot of the deep dives, Calvin. So I was definitely involved in that last year. A lot of those strategy discussions, thinking about DE&I more broadly across the VC ecosphere.
Thank you so much. And, and I do, not just because they're here and wonderful panels, but I do want to give a shout out to BCG Digital Ventures and Snap because they both have shared, public annual data around diversity, equity, inclusion. That's not something that you're seeing, every single business or at a certain interval. So we certainly want to give them a shout out because that's what we're all about. We want organizations to feel comfortable gathering, having that kind of data, having it not be controversial so you can actually look at and measure some change. So speaking of change, I do have one closing question, and then I see a number of questions popping up in the Slido, so thank you. And I know you can also upvote those, audience, so we'll do that. The next one, Iana, is since the murder of George Floyd, last year and the events of last summer, as you were mentioning, there's been a little bit more of an active conversation about addressing racial injustice, economic injustice, both in the workplace and when it comes to investments. So what trends, if any, have you seen since last year? Do you expect them to continue? What are you seeing from where you sit?
I would say over the last year, I saw more VC dollars go into the pockets of disenfranchised people of color, right? Folks that look like us. My concern is that that was a one-time event, right? Like we've got to figure out like how to make sure that there's equity, right? In terms of VC spend going to communities of color, right? And there's a lot of different ways and groups of thought around how you achieve that. I'm a big fan of kind of really thinking about like the tech industry and thinking about ways to regulate that, right? To be a little bit more in line with what we're seeing in more regulated industries like the government space, right? Like FI, right? Financial services, where quotas need to be made, right? We've got to have representation of all levels and across all wallets, right? And wallet size. So I definitely see there being a lot of work, I would say, that was done last year to really raise the bar and elevate the discussion around lack of equity, right? In the workforce. But I don't think that's new news to people of color, right? Like we've been like sounding the alarm for years. But we really need to make sure that we're putting pressure on folks, right? Because I'm starting to see a lot of corporations starting to monetize diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? It's a moneymaker. We live in a capitalist world, right? So everyone is always looking for an opportunity to make a dollar. I'm really starting to see a lot of corporations move into that space. But what corporations aren't doing is addressing the inequities of racial equality in their own organizations, right? So it's finding out how to strike the right balance and truly holding a lot of these corporations accountable. And I think we all own a responsibility in that.
Definitely, we're definitely looking to see, continued action as being key. And I was reading an interesting piece about the total number of dollars pledged towards racial justice initiatives by companies. And then the journalist was looking, I'll see if I can find it for this chat later, but they were looking at what had actually been spent so far. And also there was another article that looked at it compared to the share of the annual revenue of the business in terms of the size of those pledges. So there's a lot of different things happening out there, but yeah, it's interesting to see, over the next couple of years, how we'll track that. And Jason mentioned earlier for the audience, PledgeLA's annual survey results. That is correct. This Wednesday, we'll be releasing on that accountability link a brand new report for 2021. What we do is capture local data about the LA tech and VC ecosystem. One thing I'm excited about, because I'm a data nerd about this, is we have for the first time ever year-over-year data from all of our investment firms, VC firms here in LA. We looked at every single portfolio company investment from Crunchbase data. So we're now able to look at year-over-year data. How is investment increasing or decreasing for women, for people of color, in specific groups? So we're excited to see what that data looks like and how it will continue to change over time. Because surprise, it's not where it needs to be, as we know, but what we're looking at is what's the rate of change and is that increasing? Jason, is there anything you'd add there, things you've seen since last summer to what we were just talking about?
Yeah, I mean, so much that Iana had said just resonated and hit the nail on the head. I mean, the black squares on Instagram are great, but that ain't it. Like there's so much actual work that has to go in, the performative stuff. We're happy that you're now outwardly saying that you're down with this cause, but there needs to be action behind it. And the good news is that organizations like PledgeLA are making it really easy to figure out what that action looks like. You don't have to solve that problem on your own. You can really kind of reach into their resource kit and their toolbox and figure out the various steps to take. I don't know that I have anything, groundbreaking to add as far as what's changed or the shifts that we've seen over the past year. But I will say that I think that my greatest fear was that the momentum that the killing of George Floyd and the subsequent protests sparked was going to die out by like September of last year, because I'm just naturally a bit of a pessimist. And so I am encouraged to see that hasn't completely happened, that this conversation is still front and center, and we're still looking at this broader economic lens as part and parcel of the broader equity conversation that the death of George Floyd really started. So I think that's important, and I think that we all have an obligation to continue to keep this conversation front and center, because we're nowhere close to equity, as you said, Calvin. Even though the last year the eyes of the world have been tuned in and locked in on this conversation, there hasn't been the needle hasn't moved substantially. The conversations are happening and people are making more plans and, articulating their good intentions. So I think if there's any one thing that I would say for those of you who are on this call, for whom this is an issue that is important, whether you're a student or a seasoned vet working, please continue to, elevate this cause. And I think I saw someone in the Slido ask, how can I get involved with PledgeLA? It's easy. You can just sign up. Any company, tech company in LA or VC can actually, enter their information, and either Calvin or, a colleague with Annenberg Foundation will respond with information on how to get involved in PledgeLA. And that's really, to me, step number one is connecting to the broader community and lending your voice to that work.
Thank you, Jason. And I'm frantically posting our PledgeLA join link in the chat there. And there's a follow-up question. And let's now pivot in the last portion of our session today to those Slido questions. So I see a bunch in there, but feel free to drop in some more. And if you have a question either for Iana or Jason specifically, feel free to call them out to me and I can pass it to them. But yeah, talking a little bit more about what the commitments are of membership. It's interesting because, again, there's data practices with DEI, and each individual business are just so all over the place. So one of the things we do when people apply to join PledgeLA, because there is now a light review process that we undertake, but essentially what we're doing in that process is just confirming that the organization is indeed willing to share annual data, because that's really the whole thing. One of the things that makes PledgeLA very weird is that even if organizations collect that data, they don't often share it, with a collective group or things. And one of the things that we do to make that possible for our members is we never identify in this report you're going to hear about any individual member. So we never say company 321, here's what, the women in management has changed. We never do something like that. We look at the ecosystem as a whole, so we can say, okay, well, generally here's some of the problems and opportunities that are happening in LA. Maybe we should orient our programs around that. But yeah, we do look and see if the organization collects not just demographic data, but demographic and culture data, because some companies out there do collect their own annual survey. PledgeLA actually provides you with a free, $20,000 value, say very nice startup kind of friendly DEI survey called Pluto. But for members like Snap that do already conduct their own survey, they're able to share that data. So we sort of do a gut check on that. And then in terms of the commitments and membership, then it really depends on what that organization is. So if they're a VC firm, they might host an intern in our venture capital internship program. Tech companies might recruit mentors from their staff to mentor folks with Reardon programs. And we have a new program we launched this year we may talk about called the Fund for South LA Founders. We found all kinds of ways to engage the LA tech sector, bringing more capital and training to Black and Latinx founders, specifically in South LA. So yeah, there's a lot of things that folks can do. But let's go ahead and go to the next question. So here's a good one around what funding opportunities for minority-owned startups exist in sustainable development, like water treatment, desalination, renewable energy generation? Either of you want to chime in anything on that, or funding opportunities for sustainable development?
I think Lacey is a really good resource to connect with. And I know that he's no longer there, but Taj Eldridge would be a good person to link up with. He recently just left, but was leading a lot of their VC work at Lacey. So if you don't know, Lacey is the LA Clean Tech Incubator. It is a collaborative effort started, close to 10 years ago, I want to say maybe even a little bit more, with the then Mayor Villaraigosa's office, Department of Public Work, Department of Water and Power, and then a number of private sector entities and academic institutions, including UCLA. And they came together to establish this hub for clean tech incubation within the Arts District in downtown. And this is before the Arts District was like the place to be. So they really kind of planted a flag down there. They're doing incredible work. They are a PledgeLA member, and they are very, very focused in on this this calling card of how do we support more diverse entrepreneurs in the broader clean tech and sustainability efforts. So I think that would be one. The other one, and I know that she works with Lacey, is Fund 22. And they are started by an entrepreneur, and I will get her name in a minute.
Tracy Gray.
I was going to say Tracy Green. Tracy Gray, who's, again, this is a cause that's very near and dear to our heart. She is a funder herself, has been working in the VC space for a while now. Was an entrepreneur in residence at Lacey, so she's very well connected in that space.
Thank you. Yeah, Lacey is, and again, we're biased because they're one of our very active PledgeLA members, but yeah, we highly recommend them. They have all kinds of programs going on, from anything working with job seekers, helping them get into advanced technical careers, using equipment, getting certifications, to the founder side work. And yes, we have, even aside from Taj, many folks are active in PledgeLA at Lacey. Adriana Embas Figueroa, Estelle Reyes, but all the way up to their CEO, Matt Peterson. I was there, in fact, emailing them before this panel, something with Lacey and about our survey. So yeah, if you're interested or need a connection or introduction to Lacey, feel free to reach out to the TLSI team and we can facilitate that for you. We're happy to connect. And I'm sure they'd love to the PR too. Awesome. The next question I have is, what recommendations might we have for a Latinx entrepreneur to enter the entrepreneur ecosystem in Los Angeles? Recommendations specifically for Latinx entrepreneurs.
Definitely check out Techstars. Check out Grid 110. Those are the top two on my list. I know last year, I want to say the LA cohort had roughly 50% of its startups with Latinx backgrounds. So definitely check them out.
Dropping also a link to VC Familia, and there's also, I think it's Latinx VC. But one of the things, oh, here it is. I was dropping this. I'm giving you all a million links. How will you ever click all these links from the Zoom chat today, folks? But in case any of them strike your interest. But yeah, I think that, one way I would respond to this, I don't know if this is the perfect recommendation for entrance, but going kind of back to what Yana said about really paying attention to those programs that can help founders enter the ecosystem. I'll say at least us at PledgeLA and many others are focusing on the extreme lack of representation of Latinx entrepreneurs in terms of startups getting funding. That is certainly where our head is at in terms of bringing more Latinx founders into the ecosystem, or bringing the ones that are in the ecosystem into the spaces so they can get the capital they deserve to scale, especially for Los Angeles, where we're nearly 50% Latinx in some parts of the county. I think that it's something we absolutely need to correct. So I think it's something that you'll find many organizations are also and hopefully focusing on as a priority. I want to go on to the next question, which is, what is some of the success that PledgeLA has seen so far as a result of its efforts? And not to put you on the spot, Jason, I can certainly chime in on this, but I wonder if you might share a little bit more about the Fund for South LA founders and just some of the early impacts we've seen from that work.
I would love to. So Calvin touched on this, but the Fund for LA founders was started last year, and it was a direct response to the conversations, again, that were sparked from the death and protests following the death of George Floyd around kind of the broader question of equity. And we knew that the lack of funding for founders in certain areas throughout Los Angeles was, criminal. But when we started digging into some of the data, it was clear that this was a space that PledgeLA could get involved with. So we created what is essentially a fund that is takes no equity. It is grant funding for Black and Latinx founders and teams that have at least one or more women founders. Based in, and we started in South LA, and this next year we're expanding to all of LA, but in our pilot year it was really focused in South LA, and each of the awardees receives a $25,000 grant, in addition to technical assistance provided by Grid 110, mentorship from a cadre of mentors that are associated with the PledgeLA initiative. So we have some top level founders from leading innovative companies and VC firms throughout Los Angeles who are providing one-on-one mentorship with these founders, and then support in connecting to their broader market, developing business plans, et cetera. And so in the first year, we recognized 20 awardees, and we're going to keep that at 20 for the next 2 years as well. This is a 3-year initiative. Our goal was to be able to realize 5x impact on our investment. So in total, the initiative raised $500,000 for year one in charitable donations from companies and individuals who believed in this cause from around the LA area. And our goal was to see $2.5 million in impact, whether that be follow-on capital, new employees hired, increases in revenue, just overall impact. And so up to this point, I should say our last measurement, I'm sure it's grown. We've already seen about $2.45 million just in follow-on capital raised by the first cohort collectively. So it's been, from our perspective thus far, very, very successful. And we really focused it on a broad array of companies. Most of them fell somewhere within a tech vertical, but several of them were, for instance, food service companies that were leveraging technology to reach new markets and amplify their business. So it didn't have to be a SaaS company. It didn't have to have the technology didn't have to be their end product necessarily. But we did want to focus on companies that were leveraging tech in some way. And then we had both companies that were digital as well as some that were still brick and mortar companies. And that's kind of a theme that we want to maintain, because we know that those brick and mortar businesses are both so central to LA's small business economy, but also they're hit hard by the pandemic. And really the big message here that I would say is the goal of this fund is to serve that friends and family round that Yana was mentioning when she was, back in New York and Brooklyn, and you're going out to your network. So many founders have brilliant ideas, but they don't have that network, and they're not able to connect to the VC firms who are they're looking for companies that are just a little bit more evolved, a little bit more seasoned. So this fund is meant to help get those companies from having an idea and maybe, a proof of concept, maybe an MVP, for example, but helping them grow and scale so that they're able to pursue follow-on capital from some of the more established VC funds. So a couple other stats, and I'll leave you just on impact. Up to this point, again, our cohort collectively has hired 29 new employees, 15 of which are full-time. So those are jobs that are created within the community that they're working in. And all of these businesses are based in South LA. So, our ethos was, if we support these businesses, they will create jobs, and that prosperity will, spread throughout the community. And we're seeing that. And granted, 15 new jobs, that's not, 100 or a million new jobs, but it's meaningful, it's impactful. And I think it just goes to support kind of the effort and the idea behind it. And then lastly, I would say that 89% of the entrepreneurs actually increased their recurring revenue as a result of this program. So that's huge. We're able to show that these businesses are using these funds, leveraging these funds to become actual small business success stories, to become sustainable businesses. So it's very exciting. We have 2 more years with the fund that we're actively fundraising for now. If you are interested, or anyone is interested in learning more, check out the PledgeLA website. If this strikes you as an initiative that you think someone who would want to support or be involved with, again, please reach out to Calvin, and we'd love to talk to you a little bit more. But this is a marquee program for the PledgeLA initiative, and we're really excited to get into year 2.
Thank you, Jason. And those stats he was riffing off or sharing have all been achieved since January of this year. I just want to call out. So we say, and now it's up to 2.65 million. One of those companies actually was accepted into Techstars' recent cohort. So yeah, we believe really that it's working, and kind of the meta for that initiative with PledgeLA is also about connecting investors to more diverse founder ecosystems. A lot of these businesses were already here, so we didn't find them. They were here and undercapitalized. So we're trying to work on them. Just to briefly respond, and I want to move move ahead to the last questions. What else has PledgeLA been doing? Been around since 2018. What other impact have we had? And it's very important to measure and track that. I mean, because we're PledgeLA, right? So we have to. So one of them is we have placed about 33 plus interns in paid internships in venture capital firms in LA. What we've seen sort of as a result of this is more firms having their own VC internships. You know, VCs sort of used to be a difficult to access space. And then even further after those internships, it's nice to have a summer internship, but we actually track and see, is that internship accelerating the entry point either to tech or VC? So about half of our alumni of that program, and we're in our third year of the VC internship, are now in tech or VC themselves. One of them actually was just hired as a chief of staff at Upfront Ventures after doing the internship last year. Another's an investor at Vamos Ventures. So we are seeing it forging those relationships and creating more diverse check writers because through that. We also have matched about 70 students via the Reardon programs, closer to high 50 students so far, and we're at more next year, to tech opportunities. So that mentorship program I mentioned, the goal of that mentorship is not just to have a whole bunch of great phone calls, but to actually connect people to an internship or a job, depending on if they're an undergrad or recent grad. So that's something we're working on with Reardon programs, and we're matching a whole new group of 50 mentors and mentees. Actually, this week is the second time that the mentors get matched. Yeah, I think just more broadly, we brought a lot more companies into that work of accountability data with DEI. There's a lot more there that we're seeing. So yeah, we'll having a PledgeLA impact page coming soon. And what Jason mentioned around, if you're interested in that PledgeLA Founders Fund, this Wednesday, that link in an interest form will be live. So just check on our website then. There'll be information about that county-wide program, and you can share the word as well. Cool. Well, let me go to our next quick question is, does PledgeLA work with startups trying to improve DEI in LA tech companies? For example, a SaaS tool for inclusive language in employee performance reviews. Well, I'll just touch on this very briefly. So I mentioned that survey platform Pluto that we use. Now, one of the biggest things about diversity surveys is the first part is collecting the data, but then what do you do with it? You can have all this data that might, in many ways show something you might already know. So one of the things that report includes, and this is again free to all PledgeLA members, it includes a set of prioritized actions they can take. So let's just say, for example, pay equity is shown on their data as a problem at their organization. We actually provide some solutions and resources. Now, they're not like, okay, turn a key and the pay equity is fixed, but we want to connect people actively to the organizations and resources that can help them dig into their process and actually begin doing that work. I think really just going back to what Jason said, the moment we're in now is, are people willing to do that internal work? Now we know it's okay to talk about diversity. It's okay to talk about that in a professional space, but what does the rubber meet the road? How do we actually get this stuff done? So I think we're very focused on providing people with those resources and hearing what they need. That's also why we do that local capture to see what does LA Tech really need from that. One quick follow-up there. Is there a requirement for PledgeLA companies to be physically located in LA? We ask that they have a significant staff presence in LA. So there are some organizations that have a footprint outside of Los Angeles, but we only focus on LA Tech and Innovation. So we ask them, and especially because they're sharing data about their team and org, to have some significant LA presence. Cool. Let me see, is there another one here too? Okay, I think that got to most of our questions. So yeah, I think in our last minute, I just want to briefly thank TLSI again and thank Iana and Jason for spending some time with. Thanks to all of you. I see a big participant list and appreciate your engagement and questions. I'll go ahead and drop my email in the chat if anyone wants to get connected to me or any of the other resources. But again, we are all one LA community. We were grateful for your attention around this topic. And yeah, we think there's a lot more we can do together. But thank you, Iana. Thank you, Jason. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Serena. Thanks, everyone at TLSI for coordinating this. Yeah. Any final words, Jason, before we sign off?
I just say thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure. And thank you, Iana, for educating me. I learned a lot listening to you.
Appreciate, Jason. So nice to see you again. This was great. Thank you, UCLA. Thanks, PledgeLA. Thanks, Calvin, for the invitation. I'm going to drop my information here in the chat as well. Feel free to reach out, guys, if you guys have any questions or need any advice. Happy to put you in contact with folks and extend my network to you.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. Wish you all a great rest of your afternoon. Yeah, and have a wonderful rest of your Monday. Bye-bye.
Bye.